Announced yesterday the Mirage VR S3. The Mirage VR S3 with the Think Reality platform is something we're gearing towards enterprise customers. Enterprise customers that are looking to scale a VR solution to their entire organization. Think hundreds or even potentially thousands of devices within an ecosystem that you really need to manage simultaneously, and you don't want to get into the habit or process of having to update individual devices. That's why we've built this platform the way we have, is to help organizations grow with inside of VR and AR, because we recognize that being one of the major pain points to getting these experiences out to your end users. So come along and I'll give you a little bit more information on this device and the Think Reality platform. So let's discuss a bit more about the Mirage VR S3. The Mirage VR S3 hardware is going to be our first topic of discussion. And after we finish the hardware, we'll jump into the Think Reality platform for a bit, and then discuss LISS, which is Lenovo's Integrated Solution Support, which we also announced yesterday. Then we'll discuss some use cases that you might find interesting. And at the end, there'll be some time for questions. So let's jump into the hardware itself. So the Mirage VR S3 is an all-in-one VR headset. It is a 3 degree of freedom headset, and it is very lightweight. It weighs about 470 grams, but it also has an interesting design where the battery is in the back of the device. That's very helpful because it means that not all of the weight is on the front of the device, where it's going to be resting on your face for long periods of time. And it acts as a counterbalance, and that prevents you from having some wear and tear over the days while you're actually utilizing this headset. It does come with a wireless controller, and it also is targeted for ages 13 and up, which hopefully in the enterprise environments that we're targeting should not be a problem. It can be worn over glasses, and it has mostly sanitizable parts, meaning that the face pad and the nose cushion, things of that nature, those are all easily sanitizable. It comes with a Qualcomm 835 processor. It runs at 75 hertz as far as refresh rate, and it has 4K resolution. It's total resolution, meaning it's 1920 by 2180 per eye at a 101 degree field of view. It does have integrated audio and Bluetooth, comes with a USB-C charger, and it does have what's known as a kiosk mode. And kiosk mode means that you could take your content and force it to be the one thing that's on the device when someone turns that device on. So if you have an application that you want your employees to see, and that's the only thing you want those employees to see on the device, you could set it up in kiosk mode, and when the device is turned on and activated, they will see only that content in front of them. So those are the major features that are built directly into the hardware itself. And some of the things that we did with this when we collaborated with Pico was we made sure that we really put some extra focus on the enterprise compatibility. So we upgraded the battery on the device to make sure it lasted longer and just was an overall a more robust battery solution. And we also removed any non-enterprise related software. You'll find no games or no other applications on here except for what you put on there, and base level features like a web browser. It also comes pre-provisioned with the Think Reality Management Suite access. So if you decide to use Think Reality, you'll already have the device provisioned out of the box, and it comes installed at the software layer right from the factory. So one of the things that we've been asked about these devices is why bring a 3 degree of freedom headset to market at this time? So let's talk a little bit about what even a 3 degree of freedom headset is. So this being 3 degrees of freedom, it means it doesn't track where you are in space, meaning forward and backward, so you have no locomotion. You can look around, you can look up and down, see all around you. It has great 3D depth, beautiful resolution on here, but you will be able to get up and move around objects. Now, that actually in the enterprise space can sometimes be a drawback. Why is that? Well, with 6 degrees of freedom, which is essentially the ability to move around in that VR space, as well as being able to look around you, it does require more physical space. Typically, they also require more interaction with controllers. These things can be drawbacks to people that are just learning VR. When you're scaling these inside an organization, for training purposes, you don't want to have to train them how to use the training application before they even get into the actual solution that you're trying to convey. So if you have to spend half your time training them how to use a VR device and then get them into the actual training, you're missing some valuable time. You also have to have that additional physical space, preventing people from walking into one another or interacting, hitting walls and things of that nature. We are very big fans of VR, very big fans of 6 degrees of freedom, but for scalability purposes and for the enterprise customers that we've spoken to, 3 degrees of freedom really seems to be where the majority of their applications lie, especially the ones that they're looking to put out to masses. Another aspect of why it's important and why we think 3 degrees of freedom is where this device should be at is that a lot of the content that you'll see in enterprise spaces is based off of 360 3D video. A lot of times you'll create that content by recording 360 3D video with a specialized camera. And of course, when utilizing that camera system, that perspective is relatively locked. You could still, again, look around up and down and you have some great 3D depth and some real true-to-life scenarios you can create there. And that's usually where our enterprise customers want to be. But what it doesn't utilize is 6 degrees of freedom. When capturing 360 3D video, there is no utilization for 6 degrees of freedom at all. You can then overlay interactive choices, so you can record your video, create your content in that way, add interaction and branching choices that allow people to learn in realistic environments. It's also easier to create that content for enterprises, less expensive, not as difficult to work with inside of game engines to create more interactive, higher end experiences with 6 degrees of freedom implemented. So, we really see some great benefits of utilizing 3 degrees of freedom for sales, soft skill training, things of that nature, some of the use cases that we'll be going to a little bit later on. So why train inside of VR at all? Well, it's something we discuss with our customers on a regular basis. And if you look at the studies, it's very, very clear. Training inside of VR is just simply more effective. It has a higher retention rate. People are more engaged. And most importantly, they're less distracted from the environment around them. A couple of additional things, as I just mentioned, the distraction-free environment is a big area. They're not looking at their phones. They're not interacting with other people. When you're looking at a passive screen or you're reading a pamphlet or whatever it may be, however the traditional methodology would be within your learning environment that you're employing VR for now, this is a much more distraction-free environment. It does lead to that better retention rate. There are a variety of studies out there that showcase this. The retention rate obviously refers to how long someone will actually remember this content after they've learned it. Something that's going to be very important when you're going through training scenarios that you may not be jumping directly into the scenario in the real world. So if you retain this information longer, obviously much better results for your end users. It also provides for a safer learning experience. So you wouldn't necessarily want to get somebody into a precarious situation in the real world. So one thing that we talk to a lot of customers about is like safety training or active shooter scenarios that we hear about. Those are not things that you could train people for by putting them through those situations, hopefully. So to provide for a safe learning environment inside of VR, showing them how to react in those scenarios and getting them up to speed on what their reactions should be, can definitely be done through VR and obviously is a much safer place to be doing that. It also allows for experiences that may not be physically or logistically possible in the real world. Especially in this trying time right now, when we have a limited ability to travel around, and as we're all looking for ways to work a little bit more remotely, training inside of VR is definitely a way that you can get your employees to train without having to take them to physical locations. You essentially can bring those locations to them or bring very expensive or very large machinery to them through VR without having to logistically take them there. Extremely important considering today's environment, but obviously a strong driver for the return on investment for training inside of VR. If you are not transporting expensive equipment or traveling all over the place, to bring people in or send trainers out. Simply sending them a VR headset with the content already on there will save you time, money, and valuable resources within your organization. So what do you get when you buy the Mirage VR S3? What's inside the box? Well, you obviously get the headset itself. You also get the controller. In addition to that, you also get the AC power charging adapter, as well as the USB to USB-C charging cable. There's also a simple quick start guide that will get you up and running fast. And this is a very straightforward enterprise package that contains just the bare necessities there. So where we see the true potential of the Mirage VR S3 is when it's utilized with Lenovo's ThinkReality platform. Lenovo's ThinkReality platform covers a lot of our AR, VR devices and services, but it's going to have a specific set of features that are dedicated to this device and how you would utilize them in a VR rollout. So let's discuss a little bit about those. The portal itself starts off with the mass provisioning of devices. So mass provisioning, essentially, the onboarding of these devices to your ecosystem, to your portal, making sure that those devices are dedicated to your organization. Typically, this would have to be done if you're utilizing another MDM or a different sort of platform. You may have to do this individually. You're loading up separate devices one at a time. So if you have 100 of these devices, that could obviously be a good chunk of time that you spend doing that. With our setup, you can simply upload a single sheet that has all of your serial numbers, all of your access codes in one spot, and it automatically provisions all those devices. It's because these devices are set up from the factory to work with ThinkReality, and that's how we enable this to happen. Once you have those devices provisioned, you're going to be able to easily update software on multiple devices. The updating of software obviously is one of the major components that our customers come to us for when they're trying to roll these devices out to multiple locations. Traditionally, that would have to be done by sideloading that content individually every time you wanted to update it. Even doing it the first time, if you have 100 or even 1,000 of these devices, that could take a very long time, and this allows you to do it all simultaneously through the portal. This really does break down a lot of barriers for IT. It eliminates a lot of those time-consuming tasks, and it removes a lot of obstacles for the end users as well. So, by getting that content out there to the devices quickly, it's something that we're seeing as a major focus and selling point for this ecosystem. You could also create individual users and, of course, unique grouping of devices. So if you have a wide array of content, or if you have content specifically for, say, a sales division or a support division, you can break your devices out within your organization to get them the content that they need and not the content that they don't need. It definitely helps you manage your content a lot more straightforward and without having to force all that content to every single device. As long as the devices are connected to Wi-Fi, you'll be able to update them. So what happens if the device is not on? Well, next time you turn that device on, next time it's connected to Wi-Fi, that content will get updated. So it basically is that ready push, and it avoids all of those things that you would normally have to do by manually tethering a device to a computer by simply doing it over Wi-Fi. We also have a very secure cloud portal that all of this is housed on, and it gives you access to all of your headsets, all of your content, all of your users. And if you're utilizing this along with an AR platform through ThinkReality, you'll also be able to see those devices as well. This also includes Lenovo's integrated solution support, which we're going to go into a little bit more in a moment. But that's part of the ThinkReality solution when you purchase that with the Lenovo Mirage VR S3. So something else we introduced yesterday was Lenovo's integrated solution support, or LISS. LISS on these devices is included when you get the headset with ThinkReality. You can get the headset alone, or you can get it with ThinkReality. We'll talk about that a little bit more later on. But when you get it with ThinkReality, it automatically comes with LISS. And LASS really is the full boat. It covers the entirety of the hardware and software on the device. It's a one-stop shop. It truly is a very robust solution support ecosystem. It basically, anything that goes wrong on the device, you're going to call one phone number. You're going to interact with actual people, and these are people that are experts within these fields. They can get you up and running very quickly, or they can tell you how to replace the device. We're seeing this as a very strong offering within the enterprise space where uptime is obviously very, very key. There's also a very robust online portal, has great FAQs, lots of individual tips and tricks to help you get up and running very quickly, whether you want to speak to a real person or not. So LASS, we think, is going to be something that a lot of our customers are going to be very interested in, and that is included when you get ThinkReality on this device. So we're offering the Mirage VR S3 in a couple of different ways. We encourage you to speak to your Lenovo representative to find out about particular pricing that you might be interested in, and to determine which one of these paths is right for you. So we have the headset alone, of course, which includes just the headset and the controller, the out-of-the-box stuff we mentioned earlier, and that's available in Q2 of this year. That's just the device itself. Then when we see the true potential, we think, is when you partner that headset with the ThinkReality platform. So it's the headset with an annual subscription to ThinkReality, and that annual subscription also comes with the LISS subscription as well. And that will be available in Q2 of this year as well. And then later on in the year, we're going to be having ThinkReality with some third-party software. And there's a couple of different partners that we're working with to finalize this on, but essentially there'll be third-party content that will be specific to an individual area of interest, and that content may take the form of demonstrations or actual content. And then we're also looking at tools that will enable customers to create their own content, and we'll be making some announcements on that in the near future. Look for that in more of the Q3 timeframe. So regardless of which way you go, the device itself will be at the center of it, but we really see the true potential of this setup when it's utilized with ThinkReality. So let's talk a little bit about use cases. The Mirage VR S3 is ideal for a lot of scenarios, and we're going to go into a couple of different areas that we think would be of particular interest. If you're working in the VR space, a lot of these may be familiar, but hopefully this gives you some additional food for thought and helps you think a little bit about why we're putting this device out there to hit these specific areas. So three major verticals that we see, obviously, are within the commercial space. Commercial is very broad. It could be a variety of different things, and we're going to break that one down into a couple of different categories after this. We talk about commercial a lot, but we also have a lot of use cases within the education space. And we're going to talk a bit more about that, including our VR Classroom 2 solution, as well as how this potentially could be utilized at higher learning institutions. And then, of course, there's healthcare. Healthcare, is something we're very interested in getting these devices out there. And we're going to talk a bit more about how this can be utilized within that healthcare space. So let's go ahead and jump right into the commercial cases, which I think you'll find very interesting, and where we see the largest growth potential within this space. So within the overall commercial space, we talk a lot about these different subsets, and one of the major areas that we see VR training being extremely applicable is in safety training. People can do a lot of things much safer inside of VR than they can in the real world. It's one of the major reasons why we have flight simulators, which we've been using for decades. But with VR, you could have the any job simulator. You could ostensibly create a scenario that could train a person to do just about any job you can think of. What else can you do within this space? You could train people on safety rules and regulations. Big area is, of course, preventing personal injury. If you want to train people how to work in a hazardous environment, you don't want to throw them into that hazardous environment on day one. It would be very bad. So, we see that training inside of VR is going to essentially prevent some of that loss from personal injury, and some of that harm that could come from that. You also avoid equipment damage. A lot of the things that are trained for inside of VR and outside of VR involves very expensive equipment that could become damaged. By training inside of VR, you allow people as many failures as they would like, as many failures as you're comfortable having them fail at. You get people to be able to train and retrain and repeat those scenarios until they are effective before you actually put them on that expensive equipment in those potentially hazardous scenarios. It also allows you to train for emergency scenarios. And that's an area that's especially sensitive in some of today's climate. Things like active shooter scenarios or fire scenarios, things of that nature. You won't necessarily have that opportunity to have people be in those situations in the real world. So how do you train people for the things that fortunately are rare and hopefully will never happen to them, but you want them to be prepared for in the case that it does happen? So it does give you that ability to train for those situations. And then, a thing that we really see happening when you train inside of VR is you reduce a lot of those incidents that might happen when people don't receive the proper level of training. So if you're training people on safety procedures, you can essentially ensure that you're going to have less accidents on site, less loss of people downtime, less loss of resources. All of those things are incredibly effective, and we see as a great big benefit of training inside of VR. It also encourages employees to adopt best practices. You could train them on the way that you'd like to see them do their job to the best of their ability, and you could also continue to quiz them and go back to that. Going back and making sure that they are just as effective as when they first started, or making sure they are as effective as your best employees. So we see these as some great benefits and some potential areas where safety training really can push the adoption of virtual reality. Within that commercial space, we also see a lot of people utilizing VR for soft skills training. So soft skills training, what does that mean? The training of techniques and tools that people may not need to learn for a specific job, but more in a general sense, and how they interact with one another within that space. So some of the things that we see soft skills training being utilized for is interview training. How do you conduct good interviews, and how do you make sure that you're asking the right questions to potential candidates? But then also, how do you can actually utilize VR to test candidates and assess their skills. Also allows you to successfully onboard new hires, gives you a very specific homogeneous platform to always make sure that every new hire is seeing the same process. Allows you to capitalize on your best people, maybe your best trainers, and have them at all places within your organization by transporting them through VR and getting them to train all of your folks in equal fashion. Within soft skill training, we also can practice conflict resolution inside of VR. You can face difficult scenarios without having to actually experience it. First time you have a confrontation with a customer, first time you are having to solve a difficult employee situation. Those things are not things that you want to jump into on the very first day or experience for the first time and have to resolve for. So having people trained in advance through VR is definitely an effective way to ensure better outcomes. You could also do things like train for oral presentations and speeches, which a lot of people have difficulty doing. Speaking in front of large audiences is something that a lot of folks have trouble with. So you could train for that inside of VR and give people the opportunity to practice their presentations in front of audiences inside that VR space. And then you could also provide instruction on how your customers and clients should interact. If you want to do things like sales training or people skills in general, how you make sure that the folks that you're putting out facing your customers are really up to par. So again, another form of on-the-job training, but in that soft skill area. All of these things can be done extremely effectively through VR. And another area we're seeing is very popular right now. Again, considering today's climate, a lot of people unfortunately out of work and maybe getting back to new jobs, or things like automation, changing the roles of what jobs have to be, is reskilling and upskilling. So how do you take an employee that's been strong with your organization and get them prepared for a new job? Or how do you take somebody that is a strong player and give them new skills to get them up to a higher level? So reskilling and upskilling through VR is extremely effective. You could train long-term employees on new systems. You could also re-educate those employees that might be returning to the workforce after being out for any number of reasons. It also creates new paths for team members that are adversely impacted by automation. So we do know that there's a lot of things going on that are removing some manual labor jobs. So how do you reskill those folks for jobs that could potentially allow them to stay within your organization? It also allows you to assess those employees' skill sets for reassignment. So you could run people through scenarios that check where their best skills might lie. And doing that through VR is a very effective way of that assessment. And you could then take that information back and make educated decisions on where that person belongs within your environment. It also helps to avoid costly employee turnover due to dissatisfaction within the workplace by keeping them consistently learning new skills, by pushing them to kind of step out of their comfort zone into new areas within your organization. A bit of cross-training can be done. All of those things are very effective when done through VR correctly. So we see a lot of additional use cases within the commercial space for that reskilling and upskilling. Education is another area that we think is a major use case for the Mirage VR S3, as well as VR in general. Education is the largest growth area for virtual reality training. So we think that this device is tailored very specifically towards that, and we've even included it in our VR Classroom 2 solution. So what is VR Classroom 2? VR Classroom 2 is essentially a full package that gets pushed out to K through 12 students. And when that's essentially purchased, it comes with not just the headset, it also comes with the Think Reality platform, as well as Land School, which is a teacher portal. I can discuss a little bit more about that in a moment. But it also includes some extensive educational content through some partners such as Viative, DevClever, and Labster. That teacher portal, that Land School portal, is a separate portal that the teacher will have access to. So you'll have your IT portal through Think Reality, and you'll be able to manage all your devices. But you don't want teachers having to do that management themselves. So we have a separate portal that they're able to manage the devices within their classroom. When they're managing those devices in their classroom, they're gaining control of all those devices. They can make sure that the student is only looking at the content that the teacher wants them to do. They can also push new content directly to those headsets, and they get full control over those devices. So again, if the teacher says you're looking at a blank screen, you're looking at a blank screen. If the teacher says they're starting up a particular piece of content, they can do that as well. And that all happens through a very simple interface that they can access through a tablet. That's a very simplified view of what they're seeing, and they don't have to get involved with any of the more robust IT aspects that the Think Reality portal offers to the IT professionals. So a teacher will be able to simultaneously launch the content to all devices within their group. So if you have a classroom full of students and they're all wearing their VR headsets, the teacher can activate a 360 video, and now all students are watching that exact same content at the same time. Really helps for classroom management and allows the teacher to focus on teaching and not focus on device management or troubleshooting individual pieces. It really is a full solution within the education space. That's VR Classroom 2, and that's was announced earlier this year, and that includes the Mirage VR S3. So that about covers the Mirage VR S3 with Think Reality. Hopefully you found our device interesting and some of the use cases compelling. I'm looking forward to hearing some of your questions, and I really appreciate you watching. Thanks for joining.